Hi, welcome everybody. It's us again from whoamipodcast.com. Welcome to episode 4. We've had bigger breaks between the episodes than we expected, but we just keep going with whatever time and energy we have available to us. We love doing it, and we don't plan on going away anytime soon. So keep tuned to this channel and visit our homepage to see whether there's anything new. Today, Steve and I would like to chat about the development of human beings in the very early stages, about ages 2, 3, 4, and what Freud has to say about that. So Freud, one of his main topics was about individual sexuality and how it forms the roles that we take over from our parents and how we become sexual beings in society. And this isn't even going to puberty, but just the very early stages when we start building a personal identity. And part of that identity is whether we're a man or a woman, who we're attracted to, and just who we want to be like, I guess.
That's a very good way of summarizing the topic, I guess, where it's not talked about much, really, I guess.
Yeah, it can be taboo.
Yeah, it's very taboo, and at times, because I guess we don't see, when we think of puberty, when that happens, obviously we go through a transformation, but what happens before that in terms of, as you say, copying, identifying, and all that kind of things beforehand?
Right. I wanted to get into the Oedipus phase, or the Oedipus complex, has different names, which is very interesting. I don't know all that much about it, but it plays a huge role in that development of your gender and your gender role in society. So here's what I have learned about it. When you're born, first of all, let's start with birth. When you're born, you are very close to your mother, obviously. You were part of her body for a long time, and you want to remain with her. So most of what I'm saying is from the perspective of a boy, but let's see if we can make it more general. So when you're a tiny baby, in the first months of your life, you want to be close to your mother all the time. I heard that you can even feel like you are one person with her. And so one of the first things that happens in the development of your identity is being separated from her. And I'm not talking about the physical separation. Obviously, that's a huge thing. I wonder if it's maybe traumatic for newborns, but the psychological part as well. So when do we realize that we are not the same person as our mothers? And babies don't necessarily have that consciousness until they are 2, 3, or maybe even 4. And there are some psychological tests to detect that. But one of the issues that comes with this separation is, well, if I'm not that person, meaning the mother, then who am I? I want to be like someone to figure out what I should be like. And so in the case of being a boy, you very quickly figure out who is male and who's female. I'm not sure how many of the features we have go into that. I suppose voice is a big one.
Yeah, well, it's again, it can be, again, you have the two different things. You've got the social, cultural, and the biological. But you very much your mama, dada. There's one. That's the two things that is thrown upon you. It's almost forced upon you.
Right.
before you even get a chance to state your own like understanding of the world. It's like one is mama and wants your attention, one is dada and wants your attention. Potentially, again, it's not always that way.
Exactly. I just remember what we said in the last episode, how the convention is to have two parents. I mean, nowadays it's often only one, but it would be fascinating to find out what else could be possible, what that would mean for the children and their development. So if you want to get back on that topic, that would be great. If you have any more insights.
Again, my memory is terrible. My memory is terrible, so I can't always remember what we spoke about last time. But I do remember, discussing parentage and how interesting it would be to raise various different children from various different parents in a culture of, say, I don't know, or just family unit, I guess, of say 10 different parents, and how broadening that would be for a child. Again, in my opinion, it might be really confusing. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't thought it through either. Obviously, you would get contributions from more people, more personalities. That sounds like a positive thing. But the big question for me is what it would mean for your sexual identity. I could see there being a good purpose for having one male and one female parent, so that you can learn about the interaction of the genders. But yeah, we just don't know what else is possible and what consequences it would have.
Just to clarify, because this is me being ignorant here, in terms of sexual identity, do you mean male or female? Or do you mean who you're attracted to?
Well, I was at first going for male or female, but of course, yes, the attraction is a big factor as well. That's part of some people call it orientation, but I think that word doesn't go deep enough.
Definitions of words, because this is a fascinating one, is that I always remember back on, like, if you're filling out a form, for example, for I don't know, a job, it would say sex, male or female, and now it says gender, male or female. And that happened in the last, I don't know, 10, 20 years or so, where 10, 15 or whatever, where the definition has changed. So it used to be, your sex was male or female. That's what the term was used. And now I think that they use the term gender, which is fine, but I think people still think that sex can mean gender too. But I think they're trying to make it two different things.
Yeah. So are you one of those people who likes to differentiate between the two? Would you like to define them? Or is that complicated in itself?
Maybe, but I don't know if I think about it too much. I think it has its place. I think, again, I like all things when I think about like topics like this, there is no right or wrong. It's just what options people want. So if people want to be called, like, if they want it to be, your sexual orientation is male, female, or if your gender is male or female, then go for it. Like, who is anyone else to say no or yay to these things? Like, no one has a place to say.
Yeah, I don't mean we're trying to be politically correct. Just we're not trying to be confusing.
Yes.
So we can define for ourselves what we want those words to mean in the course of this episode, just for example.
Yeah. Like, I think one way I've interpreted it, and it's probably wrong because, again, I'm ignorant, is gender to me is what you feel you are on the inside, I guess. So, like, that's just, again, the way I define it. It's probably not the current definition of, but so if I say my sex, I'm like, well, I'm a man because I have, testicles and a penis. Like, that makes me a man,
right?
Physically, but gender-wise, I'm just human. So in a way, I probably identify as non-binary in terms of what I guess, who am I in terms of Stephen, the entity inside this body, or that controls this body, or whatever, however you want to define it. I don't see myself as male or female.
So this is particularly relevant for transgender people, right?
Yes, because Yes, yeah.
For me, this is where this differentiation became interesting the first time. Because there people can have the opposite feeling of what their body is made of, right?
Yeah.
But no, it's very interesting how anyone could actually say that the thing inside of my body, the I don't know if you want to call it spirit or mind,
yeah.
being, does not necessarily need to be male or female. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I personally have not thought about that too much. The question has never come up. Obviously, different people are confronted with different questions and at different times of their life.
Yeah.
So I'm going to think more about that one.
It's different. It's throwing back to the a young age that you talked about. That I think culturally we're very bad at allowing children to just experience again who they are, because you hear about things like young boys just want to wear a dress, like just that's just what they enjoy. They like playing with dolls or whatever, and it's like for some reason that's such a big issue for a lot of people, and in a way we seem to be on a cusp of we're in it. We're in the revolution. We're in the moment of this over the last X amount of years, where it is finally becoming acceptable and okay, and realizing that that's just a human being that's just exploring things that actually don't matter, like what clothes you wear, what toys you play with. Like, to think that that's going to like have an impact on negatively or positively, really, it just is. It's just that child wants, if it makes the child happy, then whatever.
Right. We have strong expectations for children,
so
especially.
Children.
And when they don't turn out the way we expect, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a parent myself, but I just see it around me, and it's also a topic in the media sometimes. How when things don't go according to tradition or expectation, we are disappointed.
Yeah.
We take it personally. We try to force our expectation onto that child, and that is just for the worse. It makes things worse.
Yeah, it seems to happen to a lot of fathers where they probably like they can only really relate to other men. Like they can still, like, there seems to be a trend that maybe it's false, but it seems to be a trend that I've noticed, is that not always, because again I hate to make absolute statements, but men tend to not be as empathetic and nurturing and etc as women. Therefore, they can't relate to women the same way that women can relate to women and men. That makes sense. Therefore, when they have a daughter, they seriously struggle. They're still loving and caring and really, they're protective, but they don't know necessarily how to relate, and they end up installing their so-called masculinity or their male ideology, like sports. Like, you hear that all the time from America. Again, I don't know why this is, but where and it was calendars. It was what was it? How I Met Your Mother. That
Yes,
TV
I
show.
thought of that too. Yeah. The Canadian girl.
Is it Robin?
Yes.
And where she's constantly like laddish and like, this is the way I was brought up, blah blah blah. Because my dad, there's a few examples in TV shows. Again, I don't know how frequent that actually is in society, but I imagine it's quite prominent where, because you want to bond with your child, and if you only have certain things you like, and if they like other things, you don't feel like you can relate. So therefore, you want to find something that you can connect to, and because you're an adult and they're a child, you're more domineering. Therefore, you inflict it's easier to inflict your ideology onto the child, because the child just wants to have your approval a lot of the time, rather than going down to the child's level and being like, what do you want to do? And I'll learn from you. And I guess that shapes, again, the who am I quite frequently.
Yeah.
then again, it flips, I guess, to flip that to the female side, where mums, I'm sure, very often when they have sons, actually sometimes again, they perhaps wanted a daughter, and therefore inflict a lot of the feminine ideology onto their children, their sons.
Right. Yeah. Let me get back to the Oedipus thing.
Yeah, right.
I was at the stage of becoming a separate individual, but I didn't get into the Oedipus part yet.
Yeah.
So around the age of 3, and by this time we've decided whether we are like father or like mother. And in the case of a boy, he will feel sexually attracted to his mother. And this phase is named after Oedipus in some Greek story, because even as an adult, he was involved with his mother and attracted to his
Well,
mother.
the interesting thing about that story is that it's a false use of
Is it?
of him, because
Uh-huh.
he didn't know it was his mother.
Right. Okay.
So the prophecy was that he would when he was born, there's a prophecy that he would kill his father and marry his mother or whatever. And then they abandoned him, and he went off and lived his life. And he comes back, and no one knows who he is, and he doesn't know who he is, kind of thing. And then just happens to, through circumstance, kill his father and then marry his mother, but didn't know that. So it's an interesting misnomer that, but it works for the fact that obviously it's used and works. Freud used it. The fact that there are some, whether biological or cultural phenomenon, where that can be the case, I guess. Like, again, like all things, I never try say it is this way or it is that way. It just is for some people or it isn't for others or whatever.
Yeah. I wonder whether Oedipus would like the way we use his name now, the thing we connect with his name, or not.
Well, luckily, I think that. Well, luckily, the Oedipus thing is it's just a story. Like it's as far as we're aware, it's not actually it's a myth, not a history. I think.
Okay, I wasn't aware.
Again, I love my Greek nonsense, so I'm pretty sure it was a myth.
Okay.
But then again, you have prime examples of this. What you're talking about from the early age is, from the age of like 7, 8, you try and copy your parents even younger, of having boyfriends and girlfriends and stuff. And you're already in that phase of trying to find a life partner, I guess. And you've copied that from where your parents.
So that would be elementary school.
Guess
yeah,
so,
yeah. I remember there being, or even in kindergarten, there were relationships, or pseudo relationships.
Oh yeah,
Or people even getting married in kindergarten.
Yeah, because that was the epitome of adulthood, wasn't it? As a kid, you think, okay, what you're taught that getting married was the epitome of kind of being an adult.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the thing you'd aspire for.
Yeah, little girls have their dolls and their prams even sometimes, because they want to be a woman, and that's what it seems to be about.
Yeah. Well, because that's what they see. So again, it'd be fascinating as culture changes, hopefully more and more, to see how frequent that actually is in a society where it isn't just pushed upon them from a young age. Would be interesting.
Okay, let's get back to the story about the development of, again, a little boy, first of all. And I don't know if this applies one-to-one to girls. I have read that there is a complex on the flip side. I don't remember the name of it. Some woman in some mythical story, probably again, who fell in love with her father. I can't remember the name.
I don't know.
But there is a theory that the same exists for the other side. I'm just not as familiar with it, and I don't know if it would really be the same mirrored, or if there would be other parts to that situation. But a boy is attracted to his mother at the age of 2 or 3, and he realizes that she doesn't feel the same way about him. He feels like the father gets in the way, right? So he's jealous of him. And so he is in a fight with the father. And this is mainly in his mind, right?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt again, but like, does the theory say it's sexual? Does it say it's emotional?
I think both.
Okay.
Or is this
No.
different from what you've heard?
Yeah, I don't know much about biology, but I'm like, it's again, it just seems like the term sexual seems very strange to be used as children because you don't have you don't have an actual sexual impulse.
I see.
Yet.
Because you haven't been through puberty?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's a different level than what
Sorry. Yeah.
adults or teenagers go through.
Yeah.
It's
There's
more
a
a
physical
fundamental
bond
thing.
there, obviously, between a
Yeah.
child. But again, to use the term sexual just seems very dark and strange.
Right. It's not like the boy knows about sexual activity and that's what he wants. It's just he feels naturally drawn to his mother, and not just any woman, but just his mother in the beginning.
Yeah. I guess maternal probably is a better word, isn't it? Maternal attraction.
Sure, yeah. So she is the representative of womanhood for him at that stage, and the father of manhood. And he realizes that they're a couple. He cannot get to his mother because she seems to always go to his father to be close. And again, this doesn't mean that he observes them having sex, just them being happy together, or maybe kissing. I don't know how aware he is of those things. But there is definitely a triangle dynamic going on. And so he is conflicted because he needs the support of his father. He realizes that he's dependent on his parents. His father takes the role of kind of defending the family from outside dangers. But at the same time, he wants to be close to the mother and has a problem with the father being the partner of the mother. And so he's kind of in a competition. And obviously, he cannot physically fight the father. That's not how it works, how it turns out. But the fight goes on in his mind mainly. And he is trying to figure out what to do about the situation. It would be nice if he could just wish for the father to be gone. I mean, that's probably what he does anyway, he just wishes him to be gone. But if that doesn't happen, then he has to come up with another strategy. But he realizes that he can't do anything to get the mother for himself.
Well, I mean, you would the child would, because you'd know through screaming or crying or like, again, child is biologically programmed to survive, and if there is a threat, the threat being the other parent, then to the attention that it wants, because again, survival is also at that stage the happiness thing. So what makes me happy? Okay, being with mummy or being with daddy or whatever. And then that's part of the survival programming. Then something threatens that. Then children are so good at manipulating parents. Like it's uncanny what they can do and say to play the parents off each other, to throw tantrums that gets the attention of one parent, blah 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 blah. So yeah,
that's a good point. And they don't even know they're doing it. They just act on instinct, right?
Yeah.
So what happens next? If everything turns out well, in a healthy sexual development, the boy will realize that he cannot have the mother for himself, and he will distance himself. I want to say emotionally, but not in every sense emotionally, because there's still a bond there, the
Yeah,
bond that you end up having in the end with your mother, a source of support and understanding, but not a sexual connection. So he kind of gives up on that, and then basically starts looking elsewhere for a female mate. But
yeah,
again, not in the sense as a teenager or an adult, but just being open to other women and no longer being so focused with that one woman that he started out with. And a lot of things can go wrong in this. It's not called a complex for nothing. and that and whatever does happen for that boy can have consequences for the rest of his life. Um,
yeah.
and
There's
again, I don't know if it's the same for girls. I imagine they make
it'll
and
be very similar.
exchange connections to their parents as well.
Yeah, it'll be because again, as children, we don't really have a identity as such. So whether you're boy or girl, it's more of a child. Like again, you may be biologically different, but you don't have um the later on in life impulses or whatever or situation. So you're just a blank slate, and therefore, I think there'll be very similar. We talk about things that people with like women with girls with daddy issues. That's
Mm-hmm.
a phrase that's thrown around obviously a lot. Or boys with mummy issues.
And that can mean several things. It's not one phenomenon.
Yeah, yeah,
But you're right. The girl's connection to their fathers can be just as complex
yeah,
and
yeah.
just as important for their sexual development. Um, let's
Yes,
see.
because again, I say like how your parents treat each other is
Mm-hmm.
very much another thing from the get go, from when you're born. How they treat each other is how you're learning to eventually treat those that you will be partnered with.
Just
So
today, just today, as I was walking through town, I saw a guy um, with his wife, girlfriend, I don't know, and they had a little girl, probably their daughter, walking in front of them, and he was kind of in a macho stance, or the way he held himself looked a bit
yeah,
macho. You know how they like to be a bit
puff
wide.
chest,
I
puff
don't know how to
shoulders. Yeah,
describe it. Yeah, that's part of it. And a gold chain around his neck, and the the girlfriend being more, subtle or passive,
yeah,
and he being dominant, and also the way he spoke to his daughter sounded macho. And then when I listened to a bit of what he was saying, I didn't understand what he said, but I understood that was Russian or something close to Russian. And I thought, wow, this is exactly like the image I get from media about Russian husbands and fathers. And how is it possible that this kind of behavior can be associated with an entire country? And I guess a big part of it is that it gets passed on from generation to generation. Uh, a boy watches his parents, how his father, in this case, makes demands, and the mother just goes along with it, and so he dominates, and she just has to do what he says. She seems to be dependent on him, and then we act it out as though it were a blueprint for the rest of our lives.
yeah, yeah. Like, again, when a cultural norm, inverted commas norm, um, is shown on media, it's always just potentially a majority,
Mm-hmm.
potentially not always, but just like okay, so they got a lot of Eastern European and Russian culture is still very much the traditional masculine male, feminine female timid, aggressive, blah, 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 contrasts. Whereas in Western culture, not saying, well, actually, I am saying that one's better because actually, I very rarely do this, but I very like I put a yay or nay on it. But yeah, there's no reason for either partner to be domineering or aggressive towards the other.
Yeah,
Like that diminishes.
I agree. I think it's progress when someone doesn't hurt the other one just because
Yeah,
they fill a certain role.
yeah. There's no need for, again, causing whether a like emotional suppression in terms of like, again, domineering that woman or man can't like say what they feel or think because it's not appropriate to their role.
Yeah.
It's just nonsense. It's absolute nonsense.
Yeah, and I think none of this happens out of spite or just trying to force the situation into being conducive to the blueprint that we watched when we were young. I think
Yeah.
it's just an automatic thing. And
It's a leftover evolutionary thing, isn't it?
sorry again?
It's a leftover evolutionary trait that just we can't seem to shake because
Right.
we have to, like, the male being is more physical, so therefore can go do the hunting, gathering, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Like, again, in general, not always, often.
Right. There's definitely a biological origin for that. It's not, I think it's not arbitrary, but I'm even talking in a person's lifespan. Will a person ever become conscious of his programming and be in charge of it to consciously make decisions about what role he wants to fulfill? I don't know. I guess for some people that it will happen, but probably only later on in life, maybe in their 40s, the soonest, because just so ingrained in us.
And a dramatic situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you say, for most people, it'll probably be again in their late 30s, 40s, even beyond. Do they have a sort of crisis that they go through a who am I process, and they something like, yeah, because they're now halfway beyond their life expectancy.
Mm-hmm.
That tends to be the trigger, the whole midlife crisis thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So they reevaluate.
like, yeah, reevaluate, and it causes a lot of trauma, it causes a lot of difficulties. They don't know what to do with themselves, so they go out and do crazy things,
Mm-hmm.
impulsive things. And then they may just go back to original behavior, how they were beforehand, or they may, have progressed and decided to change a few things. But again, that change is painful. That change is
Yeah.
difficult. That change requires, as we talked about before, a certain amount of humility and modesty to admit you're wrong
Mm-hmm.
and be like, and again, technically not just, it's not your fault you're wrong. That's the thing. Again, people don't want to admit it because they feel like they have to blame themselves and feel guilty or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's nonsense. You just go, okay, well, that's just the way it was. We've seen a better way, or a way that looks like it's, I guess, more likely to increase happiness, maybe, because again, that's ultimately what we should be striving for.
Yeah. We want to harmonize with each other. We want conflicts to disappear, not by suppressing them, but by understanding them, and then accepting our situation and trying to work it out. Another topic we could talk about in this context is sexual orientation, and if you prefer another term, I don't care. But
Yeah.
I was told once by she was a stranger, but she was very open when I talked to her. We got talking, and she started talking about her family and said that her nephew recently decided to be gay, and it was something she didn't like. She was disappointed again, maybe because that didn't fill the expected role for a man. But what got me was the word decide. And I thought, I only have a few gay friends and I don't get to talk about this topic a lot. But from what I understand, it's not something you decide. It's rather something you discover or just go through. I mean, confront. It's not really something you have power over. So that was interesting. And all I could say to her was, human development of sexuality is very complex and we don't understand a lot about it. So I wonder how that really comes about. But it's best to just try to understand the person.
Yeah. Again, the how is, I guess, less important than the acceptance and love around that kind of thing. Because I think people do focus too much on the, like, again, not necessarily the how, but the, why are you this way, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, no, that's don't be so, again, judgmental as a culture, etc. Like, I've had some weird but fascinating experiences with it all, because obviously going back to things like again, terminology of things like masculine and feminine, and to do with emotions. Again, I think we've brushed on it before. Whereas during my teenage years, well, during my early childhood and teenage years, very outwardly emotional person. Would cry at films, would get upset if someone called me a name, be very sensitive to all these things. And, I processed those and kind of learned to accept those. And especially at university, I was amongst a bunch of young ladies, women, with my friends that were fascinated by this, that a man was okay just to be expressive about these emotions. But then I met a lot of people who were like, assumed I was gay. And it was fascinating for me to be like, well, first of all, to be like, okay, well, was I? Like, am I actually gay? And is it a cultural thing that I think I'm like not gay? And is it programmed into me, kind of thing? But so I spent a lot of time thinking about that, and came to the conclusion that biologically I'm definitely attracted to women and can appreciate a man, can appreciate all forms of physical men and blah 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 blah, but don't necessarily want to kiss or hold hands or whatever and have that connection with men. And with the emotional side of it, I actually specifically remember being at a party, and it was someone who was gay, she was lesbian, and she used this argument of me being quite emotional to say that I was definitely gay. And I was like, that doesn't work. Like, emotions aren't, like, I was saying to her, like, I don't think emotions are, like, just because I have a traditional feminine sense of emotion, that why does it have to have a feminine or masculine trait onto it? That's completely different from sexual orientation or even personality orientation. Like, you might actually be attracted to the traditional masculine, like, traits of, again, dominant. You might actually be attracted to those things, but those can be in both women or men.
Right.
So it doesn't dictate if you are straight or not. And it was just a very weird thing for me to kind of have to go through and assess and explain, I guess, as well at that stage.
We have these snap judgments. We like to distance ourselves from everything that doesn't fit into our worldview, our very simplistic worldview. And so people who only have a very superficial understanding of sexual development and its later play out in life will just quickly categorize you, you in the everyone form.
Yeah.
Because
we're all human. Again, despite no matter how much we think we're progressive or intelligent or understanding, we're still really ignorant of a lot of things. Like, we all have like blind sides, things where we don't actually we think we understand, but we actually don't. And it's figuring out which ones those are to be able to break down those barriers and spend more time trying to understand.
Yeah. My understanding of these things has just grown slowly, mainly by having friends who do not go through the usual binary experience and feel the same way for their entire life, and then just not pushing the topic, but seizing opportunities when it does come up, to learn, to just ask them, or to just give them some space to talk about it for whatever reason they would like to talk about it, and just trying to accommodate that new knowledge, because there's not much to read about it, to watch about it. It is in the media and there are science books, but it's not a huge mainstream topic yet that it's become a total norm, just some part of common sense, basically.
It's getting there though. Like it's getting there. There are a lot of shows on TV and stuff. Orange is the New Black, Game of Thrones covered these things, just and making it more normal. Like it's in society. That's what it is, because it has always been there. This is the myth that it's suddenly happening now. It's like, no, it's finally being accepted more now, and it's given access to media and cult and the mainstream to normalize it in the way that it should be, and not be discriminated against. But throughout history it has, because again, it's different. It's not the majority, and therefore the majority think it must be wrong. And that's why they've had like people who are LGBT tend to have been discriminated against. But now, it's definitely, again, we're in the middle of this wonderful time of acceptance and, again, love. The amount of pride that goes around the different marches and discussions, especially amongst family members. Like I hear a lot of the things now where when someone comes out, the parents are like, oh yeah, it's fine, we kind of suspected or we knew, and the child's like, oh, okay, I thought you were going to freak out about this. And it's like, actually, then you have the opposite side where you do get parents that are obviously very cruel and very horrible towards those that, again, have come to a massive situation in their lives of identity and courage to be able to express that in a society that still is judgmental at times, to have that courage to do it and then again be pushed away or
disowned.
It's horrible. It's so bizarre.
Something I heard about AI and homosexuality is interesting, and I'd like to get your opinion on this. I've only heard this, but I'm sure I could look it up somewhere. AI is supposed to be able to just get someone's picture, just the photo of their face, and be able to tell with high accuracy whether that person is gay or not. And that's pretty crazy, given what you just explained about, the complexity of someone's identity. So how does that work? Do they somehow show it on the outside? Is that by a norm?
A minefield.
Again, it's just a question from my side. I don't know how much we can talk about it in this episode.
Just questioning.
Do you think there are norms in society how someone needs to present themselves when they're gay or straight, so that it becomes obvious for other people? I heard that men in the 70s and 80s wore an earring in one particular ear. I don't know which one. And that disappeared. And nowadays, at least in the media, some men will act very effeminately. And I think in most cases it's an act. I suppose sometimes it's their natural behavior. But from what I read, that outward effeminate behavior or appearance is not correlated with being homosexual as a man at all.
Again, you can't make statements like it is or it isn't this kind of thing. As always, it's very much one personality will just be more effeminate, Like they will want to express themselves in a, again, feminine way, again, by the traditional roles of what feminine actually is, but it's just them expressing who they are. They're just being themselves, and they're being allowed to be themselves. And then you get many men who aren't that way, that are gay, that, you know, they just, they're quite happy in their jeans t-shirt, doing whatever. And there's no, this can define, if again, no outwardly thing can define. It can tell people, it can show people, but I know some very feminine dudes that aren't gay.
Exactly.
Like they're just, like, again, feminine in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
And so that's what the culture needs to move away from. It needs to move away from those stereotypes, I guess, of this is, and yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I think ideally the traditional genders should learn from each other, should complement each other. I think it's good that women in the West these days have an expectation of their male partners to be more empathetic, and maybe there's something similar in the other direction. How, well, yeah, I suppose there is. Not necessarily because men want women to be more in charge, but because it's necessary. It's necessary for more women now than it used to be a few decades ago, that they can sustain themselves financially. Well, it's also more possible these days, obviously. I'm sure they've always wanted to be more independent.
Yeah.
But that's becoming more normal, and guys expressing their feelings and just being more open for their own feelings is becoming more normal. And I think that's a change in the right direction.
Yeah.
So we don't need to be the same as the other person, but we can certainly learn from them and just be open to their positive traits.
Again, it's looking at the traits as positive or negative, and in any friendship or even a relationship, those aspects that somebody else has that are more positive in an area, like you're for example, you're better at questioning things than I am. Sometimes I just go along with things and blah blah blah. You research, you question, and that's something over time that hopefully I'll adopt and will become part of my personality, because I've seen it in you and be like, oh yeah, William does this, like that's a good thing for me to kind of adopt. And in any, I guess, relationship, in terms of romantic, you spend a lot more time with that person, so therefore it's more likely to potentially have an impact. But are those traits of personality. But the problem I find, and this is just my own personal opinion of what I've observed, is that usually people adopt negative. So over time, instead of adopting the positive, working together to actually improve themselves, I guess. Again, sometimes we don't need to, we just are what we are. But in terms of, if you're trying to, I guess, be a more productive in society human being in terms of like kindness and happiness and whatever, if that's your goal, then if you're adopting those personality traits, then great. But most people aren't actively trying to do that. Therefore, the instinct kicks in, and they just, without realizing it, the more domineering negative aspects seem to just be adopted.
Wow.
Or one side just goes quiet. So like one personality in the relationship just accepts whatever the other person does and just gets on with it. Because that's easier.
Yeah, it can happen that people give up on evolving and improving themselves for many different reasons.
It sounds so pessimistic, but it's just, again, it's my observation of relationships where like so many just end up obviously splitting up or in divorce or whatever, and it's usually because the one person's negative personality traits aren't being changed. They just get worse and worse and worse, or highlighted. It's not necessarily they're getting worse, it's just highlighted by the other person's desire to change or improve, or
it becomes an issue, right?
yeah.
Mhm.
And that's why I think that's why relationships are so complex, because of those things. Because very few people are actively trying to do that. They're actively trying to change the parts of themselves, and in a way that is, again, humble and non-judgmental. Because there's
Yeah,
nothing worse than being judged, is there? There's nothing worse than feeling like you're not good enough, or you're not, or you're wrong as a person. Like, who you are isn't right. So it can be very difficult in those relationships, can't it? To be able to,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, and so you want the approval of your partner, but to get back to the original topic, or to link it back, you want the approval of your parents, right? Some people carry that with them their entire life, that they didn't feel valued enough by their parents, and so they will live with feelings of guilt or shame or worthlessness for their entire lives sometimes. So another way how we need to split from our parents is in what gives us value and purpose in life. We need to become more independent in that.
And that responsibility actually should rely on the parents. The parents should be teaching children to think that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, again, it comes back to that what we talked about there being multiple in a society. If there was multiple parents, would be able to give children more options of how they view what a relationship should be, and it will almost force the issue, I guess, of a child seeing different relationships rather than just, again, one relationship being its primary
Yeah, good point.
observation.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's been a fascinating conversation. Obviously, it can go a lot deeper,
Yeah,
but I'm glad we were able to just address these things. They've been on my mind recently. I'm starting to just looking for these things in the world and trying to figure out more how I fit in and how far am I in my own development, because there's always room for progress. And I want that feeling of independence and self-worth that I mentioned there in the end. I want to stand on my own 2 feet and not depend on someone else for um, just being
validation.
a full, yeah, and just feeling like a full, valid, valuable human being. So it's a very old topic. It seems like everyone has to go through, and some make it through unscathed, seemingly. But I often wonder whether everyone has to go through something in like this in some form or another, whether it's tied in with the parents or gender or romantic relationships. I think everyone sooner or later is confronted with some issue about identity, whether it's like biological, sexual, emotional, mental. And I guess it's just something that happens to everyone.
Yeah, and I think that the research that you do, again, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, about how you question, you look for these things, like, because a lot for me, again, talking about things like the Oedipus complex and stuff, it's very uncomfortable. It's very like, okay, trying to understand these viewpoints from psychologists a long time ago and current, and how again it relates to me and my viewpoint on the world and those kind of things. Whereas that's why I like this podcast and us chatting, because we're able to talk about uncomfortable things, and it pushes the boundaries a little bit. Well, again, uncomfortable for me, because again, it's just I haven't looked into it much, as much as probably maybe I should have. Because again, I accept that I did have a bit of a, like, as most people do, I guess, a broken. I guess we all have this expectation of what a family should be or a parent
Mm-hmm.
should be, then once that's smashed, because I think it happens to us all when we realize that our parents are just human, then we go through a process of re-identifying ourselves and what we think a parent should be or is, learning to love our parents just for who they are and not what we think they should be. I think that's a very complex process that we go through, again, right from the get-go as a child. I think subconsciously we're observing it, and as we get older, we tend to think that this parental expectation is what we think it should be, and then boom, we suddenly find out our parents are flawed, and it can have massive psychological trauma. It can just completely tear the fabric of reality, because you're like, because that's your constant, that's your North Star. You think your parents are always going to be there for you, or blah blah blah. Then something happens where they're not. And again, questioning all those different things, going back to different psychological perspectives to help understand the genesis of that, because we often don't. Child development is still, I think, a massive area in psychology that is still being explored even now, in making new discoveries about how children learn and are influenced. And then once we understand those things, you're more likely to understand yourself now, I guess, because origins, I guess, are very important for us.
Yeah, we like to raise our own awareness and understand what is this process we're going through. And I think that's usually a positive thing. Obviously, it can be too much at once, but taking it in little bites is usually a helpful thing to feel like we're more in control of our own lives and making deliberate decisions about the direction we want to evolve in. With that last comment, I now want to have another episode on parenting sometime.
I think, me too.
Because one big question that you just reminded me that I have is, how far along do you need to be in your own personal development before you are qualified to be a parent?
Oh, that is a good way of putting it. Yeah. And that's, again, I think that sums it up right. I think that's a good conclusion to end on, to just be like that question.
Yeah, teaser.
Yeah, well put. You always put a good question. You speak it very well.
Well, we need a little cliffhanger sometimes.
Yeah.
Get our people coming back.
Yeah.
So thanks everyone out there. Thank you for listening. We appreciate everyone following us, and we will try to keep the homepage updated as quickly as possible. whoamipodcast.com. Come back soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.